In a good way. In a good way.
Well, that's how it is. Yeah, I saw you, and then I saw Patrice too.
Hey, Joel. There's cold water. You never know. It could be today. Yeah, I don't want to die in a fire. I don't want to drown.
Did you feed that? Should.
You know what? I'm going to give you a switch.
Well, I'm just asking a question. Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah.
No,
So
I'm trying
there's a mute
to.
switch. It's off currently.
Okay.
So when it comes on, just
Yeah, let's ask that.
Maybe it's a slash.
Where I am now at this point in my life, I am palliative, I am terminal, and
Can you control the
at
volume from back
times
there on
I am in a hospital, I am in
Can,
shelter,
but
I am
I don't think it's going to pick up the speakers.
here I am. Yeah, these are so many that you guys want to know. Far beyond the money. It is about humanity. What is needed right now on this earth is humanity.
Just try to give it a try. Just say to folks, we're doing our best to try to get that video to run. I'm going to hold the mic.
And if I did, is this a better one or the same thing?
I don't know if that'll even move over there. So try, just try the handheld. We'll see what I can do.
And see, guess what this? It's not quite 17. Between the time she died and she primary use is 61 of 1658, 5 years before that. Post-transition community. Unfortunately, there's generations of totally assimilated in the English kid. My heart called.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. As you can see, we're just working out a couple of audio-visual issues, so we're going to hopefully get started in about 5 minutes.
Where I am now at this point in my life.
Yes, we'll think so. We'll think.
One, two.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice. I was thinking on my way here, for those of you who regularly come to the Lectures on Catholic Experience, you know we've had like 5 blizzards, snowouts, like guests couldn't get here, and what a joy it is to be here to welcome you in the sunshine tonight for this great final Lectures in Catholic Experience this year. So for those of you who I don't know, my name is Caroline McGregor. I'm the Vice President, Academic and Dean here at St. Jerome's University. I would like to begin with a territorial acknowledgement. St. Jerome's acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee people. Our main campus is situated on the Haldeman Tract, land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campus through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and we're very grateful to be supported in this work by the Office of Indigenous Relations at the University of Waterloo and the St. Jerome's Indigenous Advisory Circle. So it's great to see such a big crowd for tonight's really important and timely lecture. I just learned we have the Honorable Bardish Chagger here with us, a member of Parliament for our region, and it's great to see so many old friends and new faces in the crowd this evening. If this is your first lecture in Catholic Experience, let me just give you the 1-minute version of our history. For over 40 years, the Lectures in Catholic Experience series has brought leading scholars and practitioners to the Kitchener-Waterloo region to discuss critical and timely issues for the Church and also for the broader world. We've had a really wonderful series of talks this academic year, all loosely oriented around the theme of living the mission at the margins. And this evening's talk promises to be a perfect capstone to that theme. It's my pleasure to now introduce tonight's speaker, the rare Father Doctor. Father Dr. Matthew Durham is a doctorally prepared Roman Catholic priest, lecturer, and pastoral professional, advancing innovation in hospice care, health systems, and social impact. By the way, I should say that I took these words from his LinkedIn, so I don't deserve credit for all of this beautiful phrasing. He serves as National Executive Director of the St. Elizabeth Health Foundation, where he provides strategic leadership for programs in hospice and palliative care, spiritual health, grief and bereavement supports, volunteer care, and the Center for Equity and Innovation in End-of-Life Care. He is the founding director of Journey Home Hospice, a program of St. Elizabeth Foundation that provides compassionate end-of-life care for people experiencing homelessness and structural vulnerability. Father Durham also serves as the Diocese of Hamilton's Bishop's Delegate to Healthcare, supporting the Church mission for compassionate care, ethical reflection, and pastoral presence within health and social care systems. Please join me in welcoming you to the stage.
Thank you, everyone. It's a privilege to be with you tonight. Just get my clicker ready. It's been a wonderful day. I was able to visit earlier today. Judy, your executive director of your local hospice, Hospice Waterloo region, invited me today to join her team of dedicated volunteers and staff to celebrate National Volunteer Week. And as we know, volunteers are the heart of the hospice movement, and I could go on and on about that, but they truly are. We can't do our jobs in leadership without those folks. So I'm really grateful that I was able to visit today, Judy, so thank you. And also, I just want to say what a beautiful hospice you have, not just a physical building, it is very beautiful, but the people that you've grown and fostered, it was a beautiful experience today, and I was blown away by the caliber of volunteers and staff you have. So you have a wonderful hospice in your community. And I know there's multiple hospices, but I was at that one today. So anyway, thank you. So it's a privilege to be with you here today and share a little bit about the work that we do at St. Elizabeth. And so what I thought I would just do up front is to give you a little sense of the organization that I work for, so you understand where we've come from and where we're going. So our mission, our purpose right now at SE Health, so SE Health being Canada's largest home care provider with over 9,000 staff, mostly nursing, but also PSW, and all the other allied help, OT, PT, etc., providing over 25,000 home visits a day throughout the country in most provinces. And so just to give you a sense of the size of the organization that we're a part of. But our purpose is we are advancing health with heart and empowering communities to thrive. Our vision is a future where every community, no matter where you are, can advance the health and well-being of our citizens. And our mission is as a non-for-profit, so we're not a for-profit organization, but rather a social enterprise. We invest in healthier communities by expanding access to trusted healthcare, driving purpose, looking at always how we can innovate, and that doesn't always mean technology, how we can innovate models of care, and collaborating with other folks, because we can't do this alone, obviously. And so that work of St. Elizabeth or SE Health then funds the work of St. Elizabeth Foundation, and that's where I come from. And so we can't operate, as the sisters used to say, without margins, there's no mission. And so we do need to provide margins that then support the mission of our work, our charitable work, which has been focused on right now on end-of-life care for Canadians most in need. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So we were founded 118 years ago. Most folks think that we were started by a religious community, but that's not the case. It was the Cardinal of the day in downtown Toronto asked 4 lay nurses to come together and provide care to 2 populations that were underserved then. And it was those experiencing homelessness and single mothers who had no supports. And so neither of these populations could get access to healthcare. And so the Archdiocese of Toronto back then paid for these 4 nurses to provide care to these populations. And I start with this because it then influences us for 118 years. You see this thread in this work of going to where other people don't want to go. Our namesake is St. Elizabeth of Hungary, and she, as most of you know, was a princess, and she had access to many, many assets and the trappings of life, but she chose to give those away and to help those most in need. And so many, many years ago, we took her name as our patron, again, influencing the work that we do. Now, fast forward 118 years, sorry, I'm not a historian. Looking at now what are new models of care that we could be doing, in particular end-of-life care. So St. Elizabeth Foundation in about 2017, the board met and said, you know what, we've always gone to where no one else wanted to go, whether it was serving AIDS patients in the 80s and bringing therapies to their home, whether it was bringing chemotherapy to the home, which was very avant-garde in the 80s and very risky. But St. Eliz always went as a non-for-profit to those communities and those projects that no one else wanted to touch. And so it said, if we look at our times and put it up like a mirror, those most in need right now are those experiencing homelessness at end of life, because they're tackling 2 societal issues. End of life that we still don't like to talk about, even though we've come a far way, but also homelessness and how people get to that state, mental health, addictions, etc. So St. Elizabeth decided, the foundation, to look at how we could look at caring for people in a different way than we traditionally have. And so this was just before we opened this individual. We were meeting with end users or people with lived experience who would be using our potential services, and we wanted to get feedback on if and when we open this specialized care, what might it look like and what would they want to see. And so this is an individual, unfortunately, who never got to our care, but her message is powerful.
Where I am now at this point in my life, I am palliative, I am terminal, and in that time, I have been in the hospital, I have been in shelter, I've been homeless, I've lived out of my car, and here I am. So the facility that you guys want to build, the need is far beyond the money. It is about humanity. And what is needed right now on this earth is for humanity to start paying attention to yourself and each other, because that's what's missing.
Out of this initial work, my leader, Nancy Lefebvre, who's been with the organization, she's a nurse, but has been started as a frontline nurse in the community and is now our chief operating officer for 40 years, has been with the company, said, you know, we've been doing end-of-life care for many, many years in people's homes, 25,000 visits a day, but what about those who don't have a home? What's going on? Where are they going? Or the place they call home? Where is this happening? And so she said, what I want to do is bring together a group, she calls it the Coalition of the Willing, bring them together and have a conversation of what this might look like, what needs to change, and how can we serve different populations in end-of-life care. And so we know by surveys across our country that most Canadians would like to die at home when all possible, when it's safe to do so, when it wouldn't be disruptive or traumatic for the family, etc. But again, if you don't have a dwelling or a safe place to call home, where does this happen? And we know it's happening on the streets, unfortunately, in terminals, bus terminals, in Tim Hortons, etc. And so this is Nancy's vision of what we could do is call people together to potentially look at solving a problem or starting to solve a problem that then could become a teaching and learning facility to help folks right across our province and our country. And so in 2018, she opened Journey Home Hospice, which is a specialized hospice for those experiencing homelessness or structural vulnerability. And it's located in downtown Toronto at Shooter and Jarvis, right by St. Michael's Cathedral. And in 2018, she said, you know, let's not go 10 beds right away, which is most models in the province. Let's start with a 4-bed model because you only get one chance to do this right, end-of-life care. So we wanted to go slowly. We wanted to do, even though the need was great and we know there's lots of people in need, we want to do this right and we want to learn from the patients as we're going. We want their feedback. We want to be able to develop the gold standard in care for this population. So in partnership with Homes First Society in downtown Toronto, we opened the 4 beds. And unlike traditional hospices where you start capital campaigns and it's sometimes years before you get a shovel in the ground, in this new model of partnering with housing, so this is instead of us trying to be the housing provider, we found a partner who already did that and will provide the excellent care. And so it was this wonderful partnership, and then within months we were able to open Journey Home Hospice in downtown Toronto. In 2019 and 2020, pandemic happened, and we were just ready to launch. Literally the Monday before the Friday of the pandemic, capital campaign started. I was getting out there raising money, and folks were saying, well, if you're opening a traditional hospice, I'd support you 100%. But opening a hospice for this population, their checkbooks were shutting. And it was, when universal access is available, come see me. And I was shocked because I came from the traditional hospice palliative care world where I was used to getting checks and being able to move things forward. In any event, pandemic struck and our board said, just keep the 4 beds at this point because we didn't know what was happening in the world. So good donors of ours, I always give them credit because they came to the table when no one else would. And it's the Unico and Primo Foods, so please buy Unico and Primo. Mr. and Mrs. Iacobelli heard that we were going to, Windsor right over here, give me the thumbs up, said that, how's your project going, Father? And I said, it's on pause until we figure out what's going on in the world. And Mr. and Mrs. Iacobelli said, just get it done and we'll deal with it after. And anyway, they wrote the check and paid for the bulk of the renovations of the hospice. So I always like to give them credit, even though they don't like the credit. But anyway, so then in 2021, we found that our patient population, so they come in just like a patient would come into your local hospice. We call it a palliative performance scale. Would come in, at 35, 40%, and they would deteriorate and care would be provided. What we were finding is our population were coming in at that same scale, but as they had 3 squares a day and their pain and symptoms were being cared for, and they had all the wraparound supports of spiritual care, psychosocial supports, massage therapy, music therapy, art, all the modalities that your hospice has, they kind of got on with their living. And so we didn't want to discharge them because they failed at dying. And so we went to our board and said, could we open an alternative level of care that doesn't exist in the system? And we call them chronic hospice beds. And so maybe it's more of a 6-month to a 9-month life expectancy. So the board said, because we fundraise, we can do that. We don't need the government's approval. We were able to open these beds, and they've proven very successful in first getting the care that this individual needs once they kind of got on with their living, but we're also able to admit patients that need that bed for their end-of-life care. So it's worked out quite beautifully. In 2022, Nancy's vision was always, again, we'd be a teaching and learning facility to help other communities get this model of care off the ground. But we wanted a satellite site to show proof of concept that it could be done differently than a large hospice with a big infrastructure. And so, although I'm from the city of Windsor, I did not initiate it. We were actually invited in by the city and some partners to come open a satellite site. And so we opened a 3-bed in 2022, which unfortunately and fortunately has been full the entire time. And our housing partner there is Assisted Living Southwestern Ontario. And so the folks they serve are folks with cognitive, physical disabilities as well as brain injury. And so it's been a real opportunity to learn and grow with them too about another population that's underserved in end-of-life care. 2023, we opened our wellness center and our outreach programs. And so most hospices, in the traditional sense, used to open, you'd first start with outreach, nurse education, social work, spiritual care, volunteers going out into people's homes, maybe offering day hospice programs at the hospice site, and then eventually morphed and grew into having a residential care for those who needed to be cared for outside of their home or wanted to be cared for outside their home. We had to start opposite because we were funded for the beds and we worked backwards. But it was really important to us that there was that 3-prong approach to care of outreach, community care, day programming, and then hospice care, beds, residential care. 2020, enough research. We had really asked our patients what they wanted, that we could start sharing our knowledge with other people. And because St. Elizabeth Foundation is a charity and it does not monetize any of our education or givings away, it has the ability to scale this. And so we said, let's host a national and international knowledge exchange in which we could start bringing together, again, the coalition of the willing to look at who are we not caring for in our communities. By 2025 and 26, our board of directors met and said, you know what, there's value in us not growing a physical footprints in bricks and mortar hospices anymore. We'll keep our 2 hospices as proof of concept, but let's work with communities to get this specialized end-of-life care into existing models, hospices, existing palliative care units, existing shelters, wherever, whoever wants to do this, how can we help them do this through advocacy, through policy, through sharing our educational resources, to consulting, etc. And so that's where we are now. I'm happy to say that we were working towards that. You may say, well, why do you need a specialized hospice? And quite frankly, when I was hired, I kind of said to Nancy, why aren't we just doing the hospice way for everybody? And she smiled at me politely and she said, you'll see. And so I realized week 2, that, or probably day 2, that the traditional ways of doing hospice doesn't fit everybody. And so even looking at eligibility for folks. And so sometimes, there might be a longer life expectancy. And so my colleagues in the hospice movement say, you have a patient for 6 months? Like, what? Whereas in Ontario, it's an average about 13 days, I think, right now. Judy, is that it still? Yeah. So, those about access, about who can access this care. Complexity, as you can imagine, you got someone experiencing homelessness, structural vulnerability, often mental health, undiagnosed or untreated, substance use, behavioral challenges, and the list goes on, they would never be accepted in most traditional settings. The care models just don't, the funding that the care models provide don't allow for it. So it's again, they'd be deemed non-compliant and not able to access the care. And then lastly is the trust, and it's taken sometimes up to 17 visits is the longest one, to build that trust relationship with our patients. So they've been treated so poorly often by the systems, all this, we're all guilty, the whole system, I'm not pointing fingers, but that there's no trust, and so they don't want to come into institutionalized care. And so our team goes out and meets them where they are. We have a video that shows the space, the physical space. They talk to them about their goals of care, what we provide, and often we have even day visits. We'll have somebody come for, like, it's not jail. You can come and you can leave if you don't like it, but come and see and experience it. And so I have all kinds of stories. I could go on tonight, but it's that ability, which again the traditional hospice model doesn't often afford, that ability, that flexibility that we're saying come for a day, come and see. So I could go on about our model of care, but we have a patient, a former patient, Peter, or a late patient, and I'm very strict on who we allow to come into our hospice space, both from tours, but also media, etc. And so we don't allow patients to be interviewed, except Peter asked us one day. He said he was one of our patients who was a bit hesitant to come in, and he, towards end of life, realized he said, "I wish I would have come earlier because he had such come." And I was like, the staff came to me and I'm like, okay, that one I'll do. So anyway, we partnered with TELUS, who did this. I think it's thoughtfully done and respectfully done. But this is Peter's story that I'll let him tell. We're going to see if I get help. If not, I'll tell Peter's story. So I'll just tell you a bit about, again, the flexibility of our program and the ability for our frontline staff to admit, even if it's only for a day. And so we've had opportunities where folks have come, and in our rooms, you'll see if you go online on our tour, that every room has like a safe, a little, like if you're in a hotel room, and because our patients come and they might have a few things that are very precious to them, and they may not be, to us, seem like anything valuable, but for them it's the items they have, and so they're able to lock those up and be secured. And I think we're going, maybe. And so, so that, those little pieces that change the model of care. Same thing of, they might, for the first couple nights, keep their bag, their only belongings they have at the door, because they're ready to escape at any time, because they're used to, again, if there's a fight at the shelter, or something's going astray, or someone's trying to steal their medications, they have to be able to get out, And so one of our patients, actually the gentleman with the 17 visits, was Felicia our head nurse went to see him, literally under a bridge, and she said, "So why don't you want to come?" And it was going into summertime like now, and he said, "I want to be on the beach with my buddies for the last summer I'll have on this planet." And she said, "Okay, so how can we make that happen?" And he said, "Well, people steal my drugs, and I have one medication that has to be refrigerated," and he obviously didn't have access. So she said, "Well, okay, well, we can work with that. And so she created a creative care plan. Was breakfast or lunch or both. And he'd first take it away with a paper bag. No, thank you, I'm not staying, even though we invited, join us at the dining room or something. But, 2 months in, it was, can I come? Can I stay? And so it was, again, that being creative to build that trust relationship with the patient population. And we're so blessed to have nurses and personal support workers and the interdisciplinary team that really value that. Maybe I'll just move on. What we can do is provide Peter's story in a link afterwards. Mm-hmm. Sorry, thank you. So the question was, what am I talking about with structural vulnerability? So they may be precariously housed, or there may be a housing. So we've had folks where there was a landlord who was maybe not very ethical, who created an apartment that wouldn't be on code, and this person had to go up 30 stairs above a garage, anyway. Those kinds of situations where it's more appropriate to come into our care. So we will share the links with you afterwards, but actually doing non-prescribed drugs to control his pain and symptoms. So he wasn't a previous user of non-prescribed drugs or street drugs, but because he was trying to be his own physician, his own clinician, he then had to move because he couldn't get the treatment he needed. And so one crisis that's happened, and then they come in and there's diagnostics done, et cetera, and then we're called in. But that's what happened, and he was so thrilled to come off. He actually, although we're a harm reduction model, so we don't actually, we're not an abstinent-based model of care. So our patients, we have a harm reduction model around managed alcohol programs, managed opiate programs, managed cannabis programs, et cetera. But they don't have to come off. They can't use unprescribed drugs on site, but it doesn't mean if they did leave the premises and used. We ask that they just simply tell us upon readmission into the hospice so that our staff can monitor, obviously, and titrate their prescribed drugs to make sure that their pain and symptoms are being cared for. And also, if in the event that they needed naloxone for an overdose, we would have to administer that, and our staff are trained. But as our director of care always says, it's that arsenal. They just want to know they have access to their non-prescribed drugs. But after 2 weeks of good pain and symptom management and all those things I talked about, they actually come off these things themselves. But that's not our intention. We're not curing those pieces at this stage of their life. But it's a natural thing that starts happening when all the other pieces of your life, the psychosocial, the spiritual, your pain and symptoms, everything's being cared for. You don't want those 7 beers a day or something. They've come to this agreement with the physician and the nurse, and day one, they're there for every beer. Give me my 7 beers. And by day 14, they may come down for one, but it's more socialization to chat with the nurse, but they're no longer dependent on the substances to control their suffering, both physical and existential suffering, or spiritual or psychosocial. So, St. Elizabeth Foundation realized that we have a problem that's not just in Canada, it's in the UK. Our partners in the UK are grappling with the same in London, England, is that it was a very white middle-class movement. toilet and fundraising and meeting with government officials and doing everything, just trying to keep everything afloat. And so we weren't looking as a movement to say, who are we not serving? Who are those that we're not reaching? And so we are realizing now's the time. There's an openness in society, there's an openness in the hospice movement to say, who are we not traditionally serving? Our opportunity as a national foundation is to say we have a national mandate to help people get this done. How can we work together, bringing together the Coalition of the Willing, bringing together all the good work happening across this country, because there is a lot of good work. It's just happening in silos, you know. So there's great work happening in pediatric end-of-life care over here, and there's great work happening for those with Alzheimer's over here, but how can we bring everybody together so that every Canadian has access to good end-of-life care? And so we just launched, I love these curtains, the National Centre for Equity and Innovation in End-of-Life Care. And so this is our mandate now as our foundation. We'll continue providing excellent care at our 2 sites, but that will be the fuel. The compassionate care will continue to drive the innovation and the teaching and the learning that we can share across the province and the country. Out of the center, we're looking at 3 areas of focus, and that's the actual care. And so providing equitable hospice care for structurally vulnerable populations and beyond. Developing innovative solutions, so thinking outside the box from our traditional ways of doing hospice care, incorporating and scaling trauma-informed, culturally safer, harm-reducing approaches to care, both in the province and across the country. And then sharing our best practices and sharing our knowledge and creating communities of practice for people to come together who are interested in this to be able to start addressing this in a sustainable way and in a powerful impact way. There's a lot of folks using frameworks these days, equity frameworks, and we decided to create our own framework because what our framework is really rooted in is patient-centered care. And so when I encounter a patient, that's all I know in that moment is that individual, their story, their desired quality of life, etc. And I move on to the next patient, and I don't know that story anymore. I listen to this new patient story, their desired quality of life, etc. And so we wanted to build our own framework based on that. And so everything's based in the center on care for communities through holistic, compassionate support. And we do this by empowering, by working with communities, caregivers, and systems through education and shared knowledge. We honor the dignity, the traditions, and the shared humanity of our patient populations. We listen. Often we forget to listen to the patient. We create great systems and programs, and we have all kinds of things available, but did we actually ask the patients what they wanted and what they need in their lived experience? And then advancing equity and innovation right across the board. So not just for those experiencing homelessness, but who are the other equity-deserving populations. So our call is we can't do this alone. So we're a very large organization with a lot of dedicated people who are passionate about this, but we can't do this alone. And so we want to work with people right across the country to look at replicable sites. So where could this be done in similar communities? We want to look, with policy, with government officials, looking at sustainable funding models and what equity standards look like. And then obviously you can't provide this level of care. Again, you only get one chance to do it right. So we want to make sure people have the enhanced education they need, as well as our volunteers to provide that excellent care in end of life. So, how is this rooted in our call? As Christians, I think it's rooted in Christ. It's rooted in our Catholic social teaching that we affirm the inherent dignity of every human person, no matter their story, their past, what the challenges in life they've had, the sin they've encountered. Because we know we are all made in the image and likeness of God, and we're worthy of care until natural death. And we know through Catholic social teaching that we are called to the preferential option for the poor and the vulnerable. That's our mandate, is when we leave Eucharistic table and the word that we're charged at the end of Mass to go out and serve folks. And so remembering who are those we're not serving. And so ensuring that those most at risk are getting the care they need and are accompanied. And so that they feel they have options. They truly have options for their end-of-life care needs. And then true justice seeks not sameness. I think this is important. We want a cookie-cutter approach to care, and it's much easier, I know as an administrator, it's much easier to provide that level of care when it's cookie-cutter, and it's easier to measure, and it's easier to prep your staff and your volunteers, and you keep your donors happy and everything. But it's not about sameness, but about right relationship, about shaping solidarity, making sure that no one dies alone, but that we're present to one another, that we're compassionate, and that it's about accompaniment. That's all we're doing, is we're just accompanying folks in their vulnerability. And then guided lastly by subsidiarity. So care must serve the person. That's why we're actually there, is to provide the care to the individual. So whether they have a family, their street family, but also the larger communities that they find themselves in. And so that we're always upholding dignity in life, because I think it says a lot about society and how we treat the most marginalized of our community, particularly at end of life. If we can't value that, I'm sad to say what they'll think of us in 50 years from now, if we couldn't focus on these very marginalized populations in need. And so to wrap it up, before we get to questions, it's in the kingdom of God, the last are lifted up, the forgotten are remembered, and every life is held in dignity, mercy, and love. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're trying to do at St. Elizabeth, and hopefully we can encourage the coalition of the willing in other communities to join us in this work. So thank you. So we do have time for questions. Not everyone at once.
I guess I'll go first.
Thank you.
My name's Kevin Dallaire. I've been living in Waterloo for about 50 years. Ooh, that's loud. I guess the first question I have, a couple of questions actually, but how much of the original problem a question of like the physical resources, like building and stuff like that, in order to set up a hospice? Is that like a large component of the problem, or is it just the services that are afterwards?
So the cost of building a residential home is very expensive, and that is 100%. Well, there's access to some provincial monies, about $2.2 million for a 10-bed build. But the problem is post-pandemic, everything is almost doubled. And so a new construction build today is literally double what it would have been just a few years ago. So it becomes very challenging for communities, even if there's a desire to build a residential hospice, can they afford to raise the money? And then the community, because it has to still be a grassroots movement, has to be dedicated to ongoing funding of that hospice. Because it's all great when you first open and you get names on the door and there's grand openings and all that, but 10 years later when the roof blows off and the windows need replacing, like any home, you need your donors with you to continue supporting the mission. So the government does come to the table when there's approved beds in your community to provide simply the clinical care. And so that's your nursing and personal support staff 24/7. Everything else is being fundraised in the community, including bricks and mortar.
Okay, so my follow-up question to that then is, I guess I see personally in our own community, I see a potential, something that could happen. We are in this area where we have a lot of churches that are under the Congregation of the Resurrection. One of the churches just recently closed on Cortland Avenue, St. Joseph's, To my knowledge, it's closed because of either lack of clerical support or funding. I'm not sure exactly the reasons, but it's sitting essentially vacant now. And so I look at that as an opportunity where if the diocese or the resurrectionists could basically contribute that as a physical site, and then you can look upon the local communities, like you can talk to like Habitat for Humanity and the local Mennonite community, and to provide volunteer labor to renovate.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that works or not, but
No, it's thinking creatively, right? It's
Right.
what are other solutions besides brand new builds? Now we get into zoning, we get into all kinds of other challenges but I think it's at least thinking in the direction of other new ways of providing care, and particularly for underserved populations, as there other ways. Because quite frankly, most of our patients at Journey Home, both our Toronto and Windsor site, would probably not feel comfortable going to a traditional hospice setting. It doesn't feel like their home. It might feel stuffy. They're beautiful. Most of our hospices across the province are gorgeous places. But they may not feel welcomed there. And not that they should feel that way, but they just may not feel welcome there. And so are there other opportunities to partner with existing providers? So like we've done, we're not in the business. I don't worry about bricks and mortar. I mean, we did the capital improvements, so there was that piece. But then it's now that our housing partner provides the housing, and St. Elizabeth provides great clinical care. So it's just thinking outside the box.
Thank you
So
very
thank
much.
you, thank you.
Can you hear me? I'm gonna go Oprah style. Just because it's okay, I can bend down too. My name is Nicole Diddick. I'm a geriatrician. I live in Waterloo, but I work in Cambridge, and I think this is an excellent model, and it's really exciting to see the evolution. How there's hospice, and then there was sort of day hospice and chronic hospice. I can absolutely, appreciate that all of those modalities are needed. And I think that my experience and have symptoms that very much overlap with severe mental illnesses that can be lifelong, like schizophrenia, for example. That they may also have substance use issues, and because of their illness, they're homeless now, because they don't fit into the cookie cutter. They don't fit into the cookie cutter retirement home. They have family issues such that they lose their home. Actually lose their home, like they had a bed somewhere, it's been rescinded, that's it, they're homeless. And so that's a tough population as well. Very different in some ways, but a lot of overlap in terms of the vulnerability and the precarious housing. And a lot of those people, at least when I see them, they're kind of living with a lot of risk, maybe back in the community, languishing in hospital, or kind of going to long-term care, which isn't a great fit for the person and isn't sometimes a great fit for the people who are in long-term care already. So I can see, and I just wonder if your program has any interface with that type of person, and whether you see that there could be some, if that could be another group that is, recently homeless, that could benefit from this type of program. And thank you so much for this presentation and the work you do.
Thank you. We have an amazing team. I'm really blessed to have, I always say it's a vocation within a vocation. Mother Teresa used to talk about that. And you have to first feel called in our space to work in end of life, because it's not an easy work to do day in and day out. But then to care for our population at end of life is even more challenging, because our folks are, they're coming with all kinds of complexities, and they don't always have great days or have much to smile about. And so for the staff, we must continue to support them and be with them. So I'm really blessed to have an amazing team. Yes is a huge focus just recently, that we're seeing more and more referrals and admissions of individuals in their 90s who didn't experience previously in life a deal of or experience of homelessness or structural vulnerability, but because they're living longer we're all living longer, they used up their assets in life. Some traumatic event may have happened or may not happen, and suddenly they're finding themselves living in their 90s, precariously housed. And so it is a huge issue for our society right now, and it is one of the focused areas that we want to tackle. But again, we can't do it alone. We're going to have to work with housing. We're going to have to work with government to be able to provide that level of care. But it's a huge, it's just spiked. It's like the last year it's been there, but you're seeing this spike in the last year. So thank you for raising that.
Hi. I'm just wondering where you get your referrals. Is it emergencies? Is it family physicians? With the harm reduction centers being closed now, you might have community care centers. But how would someone come to you?
Right. So thank you. It's a great question because naively I thought once we did our first round of public relations and media tours and all that, everyone would know about us. And 2 weeks later, people change in their roles, coordinators leave jobs, stuff happens. And so we had to create a role, a navigator role where folks we have volunteers, but also paid staff who go out and build relationships with potential referral sites. And so the bulk of our referrals still do come from emergency because, again, there's been a crisis. There's been something's happened, they've collapsed, they've gone, EMS has brought them in, there's been diagnostics, that's where we get the call about end of life. And that's fine, but we want to get ahead of that. So we're trying to work towards a model where there's earlier intervention, where we're getting to meet these patients earlier on, maybe at our wellness center, maybe at a foot care clinic that we're offering for free at St. Elizabeth, maybe our social workers offering programming, whatever it might be. We're even doing grief and bereavement services out in the community maybe they've lost their street family from an overdose or other forms. They're grieving their street family. Anyway, it's that we're not that scary hospice place or that, the C word or the H word, that nobody wants to talk about cancer or hospice. No, we're part of their life now, and it's natural. And so we're trying to do more and more earlier intervention so that we get either self-referrals, that'd be gold standard for me, when people are actually making self-referrals to our program, but also shelter systems feel that they have the knowledge, and we're trying to do education with non-clinicians and shelter systems so that they have the palliative approach to So we're working towards that slowly, but that's the goal. I would love one day self-referrals to be the bulk of our admissions, but it's still emergency.
If we were in relationship with people who we would want to access your services or even healthcare services in general that there's a mistrust towards, what would you advise be told to those folks around accessing hospital services, hospice services, and increasing their trust in the institutions?
I think it's, if you're able to accompany them, either physically or even giving them sort of support in terms of what to say, what to ask for, how to advocate, really. It's about advocating for their wishes, their desired quality of life, feeling comfortable enough and vulnerable enough to tell their story. Is that most people drawn to the healthcare space, and I know there's many of you in the room, you're drawn for a reason. You're a compassionate individual who wants to do right and has joined the profession of whatever discipline it might be to do good for other people. But sometimes we get caught up in the day-to-day, and so an emergency room is overloaded, and there's crisis going on, and there's behavioral issues, and so it's just sometimes it's a pause to that somebody has a story, and so encourage them to tell their story, because I think it brings back the humanity of the people we're serving, whether you're the frontline receptionist, the nurse, the physician, whoever is on the care team. And then it's just really becoming aware of what's available in your community. So that supporting that individual to help get the referral is what is available, because there's people who, they may not provide the care, but they know who to get a hold of to at least try to help navigate the system. Because we know it's a hard system to navigate, even if you're in it. You know, I have a friend right now with various challenges, and they're trying to navigate this. And you got an insider, you know, and it's like, so if you're not in the inside and you don't have resources, where do you go? So I think it's really connecting them with resources in your community.
I'd be interested in you saying a little bit more about the end of life from an existential point of view. There will be people that, in confronting their end of life, confront the question of what next, confront terrible experiences in a variety of faiths, positive ones, none whatsoever, and all that complexity. If you'd say something just about the existential and spiritual and how you address some of that, speak to that.
That's probably 80% of what happens at Journey Home, or most hospitals. I think, Judy, you could probably speak to this too. Is we've gotten really good at pain and symptom management. We've come a long way, even in my tenure of pain and symptom management. And so now we then rely on our interdisciplinary team to complement that great pain and symptom management, where, you know, that somebody still has a desired quality of life, they're cognitive, they're engaging with their family, able to have reminisce, share things they need to say, etc., but still have their pain and symptoms under control. So then it's bringing in spiritual care, our psychosocial supports, our volunteers. You know, we have enhanced training for our volunteers where, you know, sometimes a patient will have a conversation with a volunteer or the cleaning individual or the man fixing the blinds, you know, in the room, more so than they might have with the paid clinician. And it's that, again, trust, or they're embarrassed to say what they were going to say. You know, I have one lady, I remember, I went in, I was a seminarian at the time, so this was in a traditional hospice setting, and I walked in, and, well, first I went into the team hub in the nurse's station, and they said, go to patient in room 8. So I go in, I knock on the door, and I said, hello, Mrs. So-and-so. I said, what can I do for you? And she said, you can get me an effing beer. So they told me she was a spicy, so I said, okay. So I thought, so I got in the car, and there was a beer store down the road, and I picked her up, a 6-pack or whatever, and I came back, and I went to the head nurse, and she said, yeah, it's fine, and so I brought it in, and I didn't say anything. I just brought her a beer, and I left. The next day we were in team meeting, and the staff were all sitting there like embarrassed because they sent me in, you know, the newbie, the young seminarian, and they said, what did you do? Like, she's been lovely today. She's so happy. And it was because she was too embarrassed to tell any of the staff, the nursing staff, the physicians, that every night she liked her beer and she liked her smokes, but she was too embarrassed to tell them that. And so she was in withdrawals probably. And anyway, it was that simple of listening. She wanted her effing beer. So anyway, it's been a life lesson for me of listening to people, you know, of what they really want and need. Yeah, so.
Hi. Is this on? I have a question about, you used the term in your last slide. I noticed the phrase natural death. And I guess I just wonder, I'm not at all familiar with hospice work, how it's done, and how common it might be for people to request MAID. And just wondering how, if you do or do not provide that, if you don't, is there pushback from the community that you're serving? Is there pushback from donors or from government funders? And just wondering if you can speak to that.
Sure. So our stance is that really MAID is not part of the palliative care continuum. It's not part of the hospice continuum of care. That doesn't mean we would block an assessment from happening. That has to happen legally. But we do not admit at either of our sites for the purposes of MAID and or for the act of MAID to happen, even if the individual changed their mind after admission. I am happy to say that I think the care speaks for itself, that in all of these years, since 2018, in 2 sites and hundreds of patients, not one of our patients has chosen MAID. And so it tells you something, and I was saying to some folks tonight at dinner, if I was going back to school, which I'm not, I would love to study this from a sociological perspective it's interesting with these individuals who don't have assets that we consider assets, and there's often no family, they don't own much in life, and yet they're not the ones requesting to end their lives, and rather they kind of fight right until the end. And when they finally do give up, because our patients do, I mean, you could walk in our hospice and there's patients walking around, ambulatory, they look better than I do by Friday, and they're living their best life because their bodies are so used to fighting really hard, and they've had to fight to survive life. But when they find that peace, and that total peace, that total pain is resolved, both physical, psychosocial, except spiritual, they let go, and they let go quickly. And so this patient population has taught us that it's, they rapidly decline and die quite peacefully. So it's not offered. I think it's, but we also don't abandon patients. And so if a patient were to ask for that, we do have referral partners that we'd work with because we don't provide that service. But we don't abandon folks either. And particularly if they do have next of kin, because it's often those left behind that are suffering post-MAID. So.
My question is just something that has struck me in the language you're using tonight, because you use the term patient, which is a medical kind of term. And in the hospice that I'm involved in, when it was started just over 20 years ago, our director made it part of our hospice culture to talk about the residents, that they're coming into residence. This is maybe the last place they're going to live, but they are residents and moving away from a medical model.
Patient model, yeah. So there's great debate in the hospice movement around patient versus client versus resident. We do interchange resident with patient. I use patients publicly because we actually, we decided instead of, there was a bunch of us talking heads at a board table talking about this, and we said, maybe we should ask the patients what they want to be called. And so we called them together, and the patients, they wanted to be called patients. And because clients felt transactional, felt like, and they understood, and I think that was part of the healing. I am in need. I am a patient in need of support. I am in need of wraparound care. There's a vulnerability to being a patient, and we are vulnerable at end of life. And so we didn't come up, they taught us that, our patient population. So we feel confident calling them patients, but we do interchange resident as well at the hospice. So I don't use the word client as one of the ones I would.
No, we don't either. But we've had family members comment how much they appreciated that they were a resident. Or if they are in a hospice palliative bed in the hospital, they're a patient.
Patient, yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I feel like I've been trying to articulate this question. You have done amazing work in a kind of a small scale, and you told us the story of that across the last few years. But you have a kind of a vision. You use the word national mandate to see equitable palliative hospice care be available to everybody in the country. And when I try to think about how, like, to me, that's a massively important, like, it's such an important goal. I teach end-of-life ethics and stuff like that here at St. Jerome's. And so I'm totally, like, bought into that as a very important goal. But I'm sort of, like, also very much thinking pragmatically, like, how does that get realized as a goal? And are you going to do that? Or who is someone in the government going to do that? Who's going to coordinate all of the interconnected? I mean, we talked about some like interfacing between different groups, and I know that on your website you've got you have a sense of wanting to partner with lots of people, but in order for that to happen, and not only that, but there's different sort of ideas out there about what it means to provide high quality end-of-life care that really addresses what people really need. So like, yeah, that's sort of, because I'm kind of someone else who I want to see that happen, and I want to know how the stuff that I'm doing can connect with that. And is there like a central coordinator somewhere who is kind of managing, or, you know, is your organization going to be capable of taking that on? Is that part of where you're going?
Exactly.
Or is somebody else doing that? Or
Thank you. That's exactly the role we want to play now, is the connector. So we can only do so much ourselves, but how do we bring everyone together, all the good works happening in all the different areas that are underserved in end of life together, and again, that coalition of the willing. So that it's multi-layered. So, you know, you're looking at policy, funding, you know, societal issues, those pieces. Then you're looking at, you know, upscaling so education, et cetera. But the from community. That's where the movement started. You know, in the UK and elsewhere, it has to be fed and led by the community, and that's what supports it. And so really, it's just in a pragmatic way of giving people what they need to do that in their communities is what we want to be, that resource hub of coming to, and toolkits and education, et cetera. Because that's what we're experiencing right now is there's calls every week. We get multiple calls of individuals or organizations who want to provide this level of care, but they don't feel prepared to do so. And so our goal is, how do they feel prepared to do so? So whether it's a board, and their job is to keep good governance and avoid risk and make sure their donors and funders are happy, and so maybe I might be invited to come in, or a member of the team, to talk about how a very large organization like SE Health has mitigated all of those risks, and how we've mitigated complexities and been able to do this. And so suddenly they're like, well, if they could do it, then surely we can do this too. And so there's that level, but really it's people just want to know what to do when the rubber hits the road. What is the harm reduction strategy you put in place? What is the policy you use to navigate this? And as our head nurse always says, she's the brains of the operation. I'm just come out and speak. But she says, you know, it's not about something on paper. It's not about a policy you can reference and those pieces. It's your philosophy of care, and it's that individual care plan with that individual. Again, hearing their story. Listening to their goals of care and meeting them where they're at. Not everything is possible. Not everybody's goals of care are 100% possible, but when we can do that, doing that, and then creating the environment, the culture of the organization that supports that. So we know we're chipping at the iceberg, but I think just like the movement started in Canada, who would have thought, you know, from 1979 and 78, or when the movement first came to Canada, we'd be at where we're at today. So we're just trying to keep chipping away at the movement, so, and bringing people along with us. So.
How do we discern if, let's say, you know, in retirement, for instance, it's a time to transition into volunteering or serving the church, or however you describe it? How do we know, and how can we vet during this time of discernment that hospice, volunteering, or work is a good fit? What would you suggest? And I think as people think about this kind of big scaling aspect as well, but on the individual level, how do we know from your experience?
No, that's a great question, because that's part of the coalition of the willing is not just those in the healthcare profession, but people in the community, people who are retired, or people who have time and they're able to give. Is that personal discernment, first of all, of really discerning of why am I being called to this? Am I at a place in my life where I feel strong enough to serve this very, even if it's a general population at end of life. But then reaching out to your local hospice, they have phenomenal volunteer training programs and volunteer coordinators and managers who will sit with you and talk about what this might be for you and what the roles are in that hospice setting. And sometimes, you may think, I'm ready. I am so ready. And you take there's enhanced training, 13-module training that it's standardized right across the province. So we all have, if you move, you can go volunteer at the other hospice and have the same training. You may take all those modules and at the end say, this isn't for me. This isn't for me. Or you may take all the modules and do your first couple shifts and say, you know what, I just can't do this. I can't. Or I can't do direct patient care, but I can sit at the reception desk. Or I can do the mailing for the newsletter. Or I can do whatever it might be. But it's just really discerning. Are you at a place in your life to provide that level of care? But then there's always mutual discernment, right? So you can use your local hospice as somebody else to say.
As always, it's my pleasure to end the evening with a few notes of gratitude, and let's start with thanking our speaker for such a wonderful presentation. I also want to thank Patience and Courtney, who really make sure these events come together. Our YouTube channel, and we'll take special care to include those videos that weren't able to be shown this evening so that you can all meet Peter and hear Peter's story in his own words. You can find those at our website, sju.ca/LCE. If this was your first Lectures in Catholic Experience, you can also sign up for our newsletter there. As I mentioned at the start, this is our last event of this academic year, but we will be working on putting together a program for next year, and over the summer, we'll be glad to tell you what we'll be up to. On behalf of Peter, our president, who's normally at these events but was really sad to not be here this evening, thank you for joining us this evening, and safe travels home.